This is the second interview. So we launched we had our first episode last night, and people have been pleased to see it. I think it's a nice tonic in a time of great unease. And so you will be some celebrity drawing power for us in a way that very few other alumni could do. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm recording this, and
Okay.
I'll jump right in if that's all right with you.
Sure.
All right. So here we go. Lance, it's great to see you again. Thank you so much for making time to be with us. We aired the first episode of Tonight with Friends last night, and we are so excited to have you as a special guest on tonight's show. Just so you know, our mission statement here at Tonight with Friends is to provide connection in the time of social distancing, joy in a moment of high anxiety, continuity in a time of disruption, a reminder of what makes our community special and knits us all together, and a toolkit for surviving and thriving in these trying times. And having had the pleasure of getting to know you over the last few years, I'm expecting we'll go 5 for 5 in that field. So no pressure, though, on you for that.
Oh, of course.
So I thought we'd start by hearing a little bit about what brought you to Friends School as a student and what your experience at Friends was like.
My mother taught in the public city schools her entire career. She taught for 40 years. And because she taught in the city schools, she determined that I wasn't going to go there. And so my entire formative education was private schools. So I went to Grace St. Peter's, which is an Episcopal parochial school downtown, from first grade through 6th, and then I applied basically to all the private schools in Baltimore. I was fortunate enough to have gotten into all of them, and so not all of them, but I mean I applied like Boys Latin and St. Paul and Gilman and Friends, and it really came down to Gilman and Friends, and I went to Friends because it had girls. I mean, it was really that simple.
Great. Do you have a fondest or funniest memory from your time at Friends?
Wow. There's something comes to mind, but I'm not sure that I can recreate it appropriately.
Okay.
For those people who remember Tom LaMonica, who was on the physical education faculty, and I know he coached lacrosse and he coached football. Football was in wrestling. And so that's how I knew Tom. But when we were in 8th grade, we would, and I don't know if they continued this after I was gone, but I don't remember I think it was in the spring, we would go for like a week and our entire class spent like a week on his farm. And there was a skit night. And as continued through my years throughout Friends, my closest friends were the smart, nerdy people. And so we did these series of skits that were based on some commercials. And it was the first time that I actually got to be goofy, because people up until that point had only seen me as just kind of this quiet, big, shy guy.
All right. Well, that was your introduction. Now, I know from previous conversations with you that you actually weren't an actor at Friends School. Is that correct?
No, I mean, I did one play my senior year. It was Fiorello, and I played the card dealer. So I think I had 2 lines. Yeah, it was just not something I was, in terms of extracurricular activities besides sports. And really, I only played football and wrestle. And after my freshman year in high school, I stopped playing football because I just got tired of coming home with headaches, and I just didn't. So, but outside of Friends, I studied music from the time I was 6 years old. So I was always doing that. So that really took up most of my headspace in terms of extracurricular activity. So I didn't really start acting until I got to college. I will say that being in that play, even though I only had 2 lines, it made me think, you know what? This is fun. I'd like to do that. So I did a play every year when I was in college.
Oh, that's great. Great. So it's another interesting story, I know, of how you wound up going from music, which was your concentration? Maybe you can talk a little bit about your college experience with that, and then into acting. Can you tell us a little about that?
Well, acting was the one thing in my life that I always did just for fun when I was in college. And so I left music school. I went to conservatory. I went to the Eastman School of Music. I studied piano I studied piano. I started studying theory at Peabody when I was in elementary school, and I did that all through high school. And I started studying composition when I was in high school. And so I went to Eastman School of Music as a composition major because I thought I wanted to be a classical composer. But I always had a fascination with human behavior and motivation. Two of the questions that always kind of obsessed me from the time I was about 13 years old was kind of, what is life about and why do people do what they do? And so, and a lot of that was just trying to develop a sense of personal power because I was so shy and insecure. But it's turned into an almost spiritual obsession for my entire life. And the thing that happened when I realized that when I was acting was that I got to play around with being. In other words, it wasn't just pretend. I found that I could play around with actually trying to put myself into the shoes of another human being. And inadvertently, it sounds like a funny thing to say because people think of acting as such a narcissistic activity, but it ended up being an exercise in compassion. And so anyway, that's a long way around. Basically, I left music school because I realized I didn't want to be a classical composer. I wanted to be a rock star. And I got married straight out of school in large measure to get away for the wrong reasons, to get away from my parents. And so I really started acting as a move of desperation to try to help my music career. There was no logic, no real rhyme or reason to it. And it ended up just kind of taking over my life. I was living in Boston at the time, and I started doing local community theater and then non-equity theater. And then I applied, about 2 years after I started acting, I applied to the drama school at Yale on a lark, and I got in. So, and being at Yale completely changed my life.
Yeah, wonderful. Now, I hadn't known until I was doing my research for this interview that you appeared in the video for the Jay-Z and Beyonce song, "03 Bonnie and Clyde." How did that come about?
So I don't know if it was the director or if it was Jay-Z, but this was when I was on The Wire. And it was in between seasons 2 and 3.
Okay.
And at that point, not a lot of people were watching the show. It was mostly Black people, and it was very big in the Black community. And left-wing intellectuals. So it was either the director or it was Jay-Z, but they were fans, so they sent me this offer to be in this video. And at the time, the funny thing about it is at the time, I didn't know who Jay-Z was. So, my agent calls me up and he says, "Hey, Lance, would you want to be in a music video?" I said, "Music video?" He said, "Yeah, this is hip-hop artist Jay-Z and his girlfriend. They're doing this song and they fly to Mexico and they'll pay you this amount of money." And I said, "What amount of money?" I said, "Sure, I'll do that."
Yeah. Well, that's great.
So, yeah, and like I said, I didn't know who Jay-Z was, and I didn't know who Beyonce was either.
Yeah.
So when I got back, I remember I was on 4th Avenue in Brooklyn. I was driving down with my daughter, and we were talking about the video, and I said, this rapper and his girlfriend, Jay-Z, and I forget his girlfriend's name. She said, "Beyonce?" I said, "Oh, yeah, I think so. I think that's his name." She said, "From Destiny's Child?" "Oh, I don't know." She said, "Well," I said, "What else would I know her from?" She said, "Well, she was in the last Austin Powers movie." I said, "Oh, her. Yeah, she's good. She's good."
Well, you gained some major credibility with your daughter in that moment, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So many of us know you fondly as Captain Daniels. I guess he eventually is Colonel Daniels from The Wire.
Yeah.
I will say personally, and I've told you this face to face before, I am an enormous fan of The Wire. I think, like many people do, that it's the finest show ever to appear on television. It was just transformative, I think. How did you land that role, and what can you tell us about the experience of being part of a show that is now, in hindsight, so widely seen as a game changer for the whole medium?
Well, I got the role basically how I get any role. You know, I auditioned.
Mhm.
There are two things about that. First of all, I had worked with David Simon before. So 2 years before he shot the pilot for The Wire, he shot The Corner, which was a miniseries based on the book that he and Ed Burns, who is the co-creator of The Wire, wrote together. Just for people who don't know, Ed Burns was a homicide detective for many years, and he was actually a star in the department. And a lot of The Wire is based on his exploits chasing Little Melvin, who he eventually actually caught. And ironically, they became friends while he was in prison, and Little Melvin actually appears on The Wire.
Yeah.
But at any rate, so I worked with David on The Corner playing a crackhead. And a year later, I ran into David in Tom Fontana's office in New York when I was shooting Oz, the season that I was on Oz, and David said to me, you know, I got this other project that I'm working for, and I'll keep you in mind. And I didn't think much of it because, you know, it's Hollywood. You hear that kind of stuff all the time. So a year later, I get a call to audition, and the audition was for Bunk, the role that Wendell Pearson never played.
Yeah.
So I actually auditioned for Bunk 3 times. And then at my third audition, David Simon was there, and he asked me to read Bubbles on the spot because I played Marvin, a crackhead in The Corner, and I just played a drug addict in Oz. So I ended up being second choice for Bubbles, and they actually wouldn't see me for Daniels at first. So I found out that I was second choice for Bubbles. And of course, Andre Royo took it, so that didn't happen. And then about maybe 2 weeks later, I got a call to come in and audition for Daniels. So I went in and I just went on tape with the casting director, Alexa Fogel. And it's funny, you know, there were 3 audition scenes, but I only received 2 of them. So after we finished, it was a mix-up. So after we finished the audition, what I thought was the end of the audition, she said, "Okay, now let's do the monologue." I said, "What monologue?" And she said, "Oh, there's a monologue. You didn't get it?" I said, "No, I didn't get it." She said, "Well, here, just take it outside and look at it and then come back." I'm like, "Yeah, okay." All right. So I just looked at it. I said, you know, heck with it. So I came back, did the monologue, and left feeling like I just did the best that I could. I checked in with my agent about a week later. He said that I didn't get it. He said, here are the names, you know, like Andre Brown, you know, people that were names who they were chasing for that role, who also didn't get it. If it made me feel better, I said, no, it doesn't make me feel better. And then I forgot about it. And maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, I was on the set of 100 Center Street, which was one of A&E's first TV series. And the thing that was cool about that was that Sidney Lumet created it and was directing the episode. So I got to work with Sidney Lumet. But this was in the days of beepers. So I remember I wrapped for shooting that day, and I was running late. And I was trying to figure out the subways to go to high school to go for a meeting because my daughter was going into high school. We were trying to get her to a good school. And I got this beep from my agent. And so I found a payphone and I called him. I said, "Steve, what's up?" He said, "Well, The Wire, you got it." And I said, "Really? Which role?" And he said, "Daniels." And it was surreal. Yeah.
Which is strange because now, having seen you in that role, and for that matter, having seen Wendell Pierce as Bunk and Andre Royo as Bubbles, it's just impossible to imagine any of you switching places. Your role seemed so perfectly cast for you, and which is obviously a great credit to you as an actor, but it's impossible to imagine anyone else. Although I think you mentioned Andre Braugher as someone who was looked at for it.
Well, I say that. I mean, I say that, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I just say that because, you know, of the names I could think of, like at the time that were big in TV, it was him and Blair Underwood, and you know, those big. Yeah.
So as one of the locals in the cast, did your fellow actors look to you for guidance on all things Baltimore?
Well, I don't know A lot of people, I don't know that a lot of people knew I was from Baltimore.
Huh.
Because I just didn't talk about, I mean, as time went on, yeah. But, you know, in terms of knowing the places to go, I was a bad resource. David and Ed were much better resources. Yeah.
That's great. Do you find that that others really keep bringing you back to The Wire in terms of the impact that it's had, the sort of obsession that many people have with it? Is it the thing you're most often asked about?
There was a time when it was the thing I was most often asked about. Now it's about 50%. The other 50% is kind of everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
So John Wick and yeah.
Yeah. So
Frame.
since The Wire, you've gone on to a number of other really high-profile roles, including John Wick and the Bosch series. How do you think now about which roles you want to accept? What's really appealing to you when you're looking at opportunities?
Now I feel I'm looking for, well, one thing that I'm always looking for is a great story and a great script. In terms of role, I'm always looking for something different now. So I'm not really that interested in treading the same thing over. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's been nice is that I've been able to do a fair amount of comedy the past several years. Mm-hmm. So Corporate, which is a show that's on Comedy Central, and we just finished shooting our last season. That has been, for me, just artistically and politically, it's been a highlight of my career. It's the only other experience that I've had that I felt as fulfilling as The Wire.
That's wonderful. So do you find I guess the conventional thinking is that comedy is actually harder than drama? Has that been your experience?
Well, I hate that statement.
Sorry.
No. You didn't make it up. I've heard it several times. Yeah. I've even heard actors say it. You know, when you're especially as a theater actor, when you're in drama school, you're just doing plays. You're not a comedic actor or dramatic actor. You're just an actor. So, you know, you don't just get cast in the dramatic Shakespeare or just get cast in you know what I mean? Yeah. So my notion about comedy and drama when I got out of school was that it was, there were a lot of the groundwork in terms of building character is similar. Mm-hmm. And there are some technical differences. But it's all acting. That's my point of view based on my training. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it's tough switching gears. For example, in January we started shooting the third season of I almost said Community, the third season of Corporate. But I was also concurrently I was also shooting a film in New Orleans that was a drama.
Could you hold on I'm very sorry. Could you hold on for 1 second? My dog is not cooperating. I'm very sorry about that. So you were saying as you were starting to shoot the third season of Corporate.
So the second week of January, we started shooting the third season of Corporate. And a week after that, I had to fly to New Orleans for 3 weeks to shoot a drama film. A drama. And so, and because we were block shooting my stuff so that I could basically be away for 3 weeks and then come back and just shoot all my stuff, I had to prepare while I was shooting the film. Now, the good news was that I didn't have, my role in the film was more of a presence. I didn't have a lot of lines to learn. But it was interesting kind of having to do both of those things at the same time. Mm-hmm. And then in addition, I actually had a huge audition for a comedy film while this was all happening too. So it was a little bit like being in rep and drama school again. Yeah. But when I'm doing it, it's just, I don't know how to describe it. It's just different. But I wouldn't say that one is harder. I will say that because of the way that television and film is cast, and because in terms of theater, particularly in the United States, sketch comedy is such a big, big component of the comedic actors on television and film.
Mhm.
Sometimes as a trained, just as a straight theater actor, it's a little intimidating working with sketch comedy people because they're so good at living,
Yeah.
at improv.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So during your now, I guess it's about 25 years probably in the theater, maybe more, 30 as a professional actor. Um, how has the landscape changed? I guess in two particular ways. One is around being an African American actor. How has um, that aspect of your work changed? Are you seeing a broader range of characters available to actors of color now than was the case when you first started? And also, how has the evolution of Netflix and Amazon and many, many other producers changed the field?
Well, in terms of race, um, that's an interesting thing. Only because when I started acting, um, the dynamic was changing because I started. I kind of threw my hat in the ring in 1989, and then I went to drama school in '91, and I graduated in '94. So by then, there were three things that happened in the '80s and the early '90s that really started to shift toward Black friendly casting. In my opinion, maybe four things. One was hip hop,
Mhm.
how it had become so mainstream. The other was Spike Lee. The other was, in my opinion, Eddie Murphy.
Mm.
I feel like his popularity in the '80s completely changed kind of the notion of how safe it is to have a Black man on screen.
Yeah.
And the creation of Fox Network. Because Fox did something, and I found out later what this is called. They did something, and the same thing happened when UPN, when it appeared in the '90s, even though it's gone now, and the WB as well. They did something called the urban strategy, which was because they knew that Black people were starved for images of themselves. What they did was, rather than try to compete with the mainstream network, they did a lot of Black shows. So things like In Living Color and Living Single. Those things started happening. And, in the '90s was when all the, there wasn't just, before the '80s, there was one A-list movie star. It was Sydney. And then in the '80s, it was Denzel. Then in the '90s, we had Wesley, we had Morgan, we had Sam, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so there was an explosion of Black talent in the '90s. And The Wire came kind of at the end of that. So I don't think The Wire would have been possible without the decade and a half that happened before.
Mm.
The thing that is tricky is that what I thought was the beginning of something ended up being the end of something.
Mm.
And my experience, and this is just my opinion, but I find it hard to believe that there isn't a connection between how much more conservative in terms of casting things got after The Wire happened after 9/11.
Mm. That's
And
interesting.
so, yeah. So, and the other thing is Hollywood has always been kind of segregated. So there's Black Hollywood and there's white Hollywood, and they often just don't meet. Yeah. And that I feel like hasn't changed a lot.
Mm.
In terms of the I'm sorry, I feel like I'm rambling, but in terms of the quality of acting, I feel that cable, I feel like it started with HBO.
Yeah.
But then with the advent of streaming services, it started with HBO, then Showtime, and AMC, and then with streaming, it just became there were so many choices, and it was so much, because you didn't have to have so many numbers to call yourself a success. All these places were taking more chances. So you saw edgier stories and you saw better acting because they weren't making safe choices so much with casting, but they were making real choices. Yeah. So I feel like our television started looking a lot more like British television, where, you know, they're all theater actors. It's not a bunch of models who took acting classes.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. So, and I think that's been good.
Yeah.
And in terms of my experience with race, I mean, it's still, there's no comparison between the roles that are available to me compared to white actors with my resume and my profile. And the other thing is, I feel like just because of the trajectory of my career, I'm in kind of my own category. So I'm lucky in that way. But it's taken a lot. I mean, my career has been very much that.
Yeah.
Like most careers do that, or they do that, or they do that. But my career has been, you know, it's almost a straight line in terms of its progress, which is rare.
Yeah, that's great. Finally, and thank you for that. I loved the article. I'm revealing my, you know, fanboy status of The Wire, but I loved the article that is in one of the books about The Wire, where David Simon, it's the letter that David Simon wrote to HBO about why they should do this show. And he talks about—
I've never seen this.
What's that?
I've never seen this. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. It's fascinating. It's in a book called All the Pieces Matter, The Wire, All the Pieces Matter. And it's the letter he wrote to HBO, and he talks about having worked on Homicide for many years for a network, for NBC, and how there was a rule on Homicide that you couldn't go more than 3 episodes without the bad guy getting caught. Because when you are putting commercials in front of people in between the segments of the show, if things are really upsetting, that taints people's view of the commercials. And and so they had this rule that the bad guy had to get caught at least every 3 episodes. And he writes about how HBO with a subscription model is it opens up a whole new possibility. And I really think, you know, you certainly see that in The Wire and The Sopranos and Breaking Bad. All of a sudden, it was a new playbook, yet it was still on TV. So it's really, really one of the things I think is so fantastic about The Wire is it defies that kind of easy resolution of good guys and bad guys.
He threw that out the window.
Yeah. Even Captain Daniels, who has some shady past that is alluded to, that I don't know if we ever hear exactly what it is.
You don't hear exactly what it is, but yeah.
So, Lance, what do you do when you're not acting?
Play too many video games.
Yeah.
And I read.
Yeah.
I when I'm not working a lot, I tend to exercise more. Mm-hmm. And lately, I've been getting back into my music. I'm trying to. There's a something I never thought I'd do again, which is write classical music. But there's a piano suite that I've worked on and off for the past several years.
Wow.
And one of the pieces was actually recorded at an alumni event for the summer camp that I used to go to, which was a music composition camp called the Walden School, which I was such a positive, formative experience for me that I, to this day, I make sure that I contribute every year.
That's wonderful. And finally, I noticed that you've started sharing quotes of the week on your Instagram.
Yes.
What led you to do that, and how do you choose the quotes?
So it started as, I don't remember how many months ago, as one quote, and I saw something. Oh, I know what it was. There's a, I can't remember the name of it, but there's an internet interview show where people eat wings. It's just the interviewer and the person being interviewed, and they eat wings with hot sauce. And as the interview goes on, the sauces get hotter and hotter. And there was a quote from, why can't I think of his name? Who hosts The Daily Show.
Trevor Noah?
Trevor Noah. Trevor Noah said something that I thought was really funny. He was talking. I'm sure I can't use scatological language here, so I will paraphrase. He said, he was talking about how this would make him have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And said, nobody poops cool. So I decided to quote that. And while I was doing the quote, I noticed that there was something on the table in front of me. And I thought, oh, I don't want to start this again. And then I thought, I'll just include it. Just spontaneous, I thought, I'll just include it in here. So, oh, by the way, this is my, and then I thought, well, wouldn't it be funny if I did one every day? So I just started thinking of like funny stuff that happened to me when I was growing up with things that happened around the house.
Yeah.
And then I started pulling things from books that I was listening to. Like there was a quote that I did from Niels Bohr in a conversation that he was having with Einstein. So I did that because I was listening to a biography of Einstein. So yeah.
Well, wonderful.
I just thought it was a fun thing to do. Any
favorites so far? Any that have really resonated with the people who are watching?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, it's funny because it depends on what the quote is. I mean, when I did the Niels Bohr quote, there was a person getting there who was about to have a physics exam who sent me a comment on Instagram. I mean, one of my favorites was a quote from my mom, but that's pretty because I acted out the entire scenario when she caught me smoking when I was 8 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was the end of my smoking.
I bet.
Yeah. Except for a roll, I never smoked again.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great thing. And now we all have a little bit more time to follow Instagram. So I'm going to recommend that everyone do that for yours, and we'll all get the quote of the day. Thanks. Well, I got busy, so I turned into quote of the week. Okay. I'm going to keep it quote of the week, but yeah. Great. Well, Lance, thank you so much for giving us your time. This is really wonderful. I hope you remain well, and we look forward to seeing you back on campus before too long. Okay. Thanks, Matt. Take care of yourself. Thank you, Lance. Bye. Bye-bye.